Welcome to Talking Pictures Trivia, the podcast in which a group of friends explore movies through trivia. I'm one of these friends, KJ, and with me is
Tom
and Pat.
For those joining us for the first time, we start off each episode with 4 rapid-fire trivia questions, and possibly a few bonus questions. Audience, feel free to play along from home. The first question is worth 1 point, and each question after that is worth 1 more point. Then we'll follow it up with our famous movie rant, Where Anything Goes. Tom, tell us about today's movie.
Walking up to theaters in 1994, we would have had to choose between Pulp Fiction, Quiz Show, The Shawshank Redemption, Ed Wood, Clerks, Interview with the Vampire, The Santa Claus, and today's movie, Vanya on 42nd Street.
There was a big difference in quality between some of those films in that list.
What do you mean, the Santa Claus?
I won't say.
Vanya on 42nd Street follows a rehearsal of the Chekhov play Uncle Vanya. And this was something that famous theater director, Andrei Gregory, had been doing for a number of years. Something like 6 or 7 years. He had been rehearsing this play with a group of actors with no intention of putting it on in an abandoned 42nd Street theater. And this was back in the early 90s when Times Square was dangerous and nobody actually wanted to go into theaters. So they were just left abandoned. And they snuck into a theater every so often and rehearsed this play. Andre Gregory and Wallace Shawn had, on a previous movie, My Dinner with Andre, worked with the famous director Louis Malle, the French director, and they brought him in to film this rehearsal and sort of stage the movie and what have you. And what you have is a faithful adaptation of a David Mamet translation of Uncle Vanya that tries to capture the magic of these rehearsals that Gregory was doing with these actors. And that's the film. It's a film of Uncle Vanya.
It's time for question 1.
What tragedy can't Astrov forget?
Locked in.
Locked in with a guess. It's going to be rough.
KJ, what's your guess?
The death of his kid?
Pat, what do you have?
He had a patient die under the chloroform while he was performing surgery.
Mm-hmm. All right, and the points go to Pat.
It's time for question 2.
What did Sonia hear a woman in church say about her? And Sonia is the niece, KJ. It's the Vanya's niece.
Locked in.
Locked in.
Okay. KJ, what do you have?
That she's plain?
All right, thank you. And Pat, what do you have?
She says it's a shame she's so plain.
All right, very good. And points for everyone.
Points on the board.
Points on the board. Well done, KJ. You're getting in there. Scoring points on your favorite movie.
It's time for question 3.
How old is Vanya?
Locked in.
When did Princess Bride come out? All right, locked in.
All right. And Pat, what do you have?
37?
KJ, what do you have?
53.
Oh, I'm sorry. So Vanya was actually 47 years old.
I knew it was something.
Something like that. Something with a 7, yes. Yeah. So no points this time out, but that's all right. We're moving down to question number 4. And it looks like, yeah, this is it's within spitting range, KJ. So you might get this.
Yeah.
It's time for question 4.
According to Vanya, Yelena is too what to live? And Yelena is Julianne Moore. That's the redhead, KJ. So Yelena is too what to live?
Locked in.
I feel like I have the sentiment in my head, but I can't find the perfect word for the sentiment. So I'm going to lock in with quite a few words.
Okay, Pat, what do you have?
I don't think this is the right word, but it's something like this, but I don't think it's the right word, but I think it's something like bored. She's too bored to live, but I don't think that's the right word, but it's something like that.
All right, KJ, what do you have?
Wow, I had the complete opposite. I was thinking like voracious, over energetic, like just too much. Like,
Very close. Bored is closer. It was Yelena is too lazy to live. And like bored is close to that. I know in like the Paul Smith translation, I think it's too detached, uses the word detached, and other translators use different words. So like that's
I'll pull
close.
up the Russian. I'll pull up the Russian and check. I think
okay.
I think
Thank you.
yeah, it's pretty close.
It's probably pretty close. Very good. So yeah,
and then
we'll go
she
with
probably
lazy.
laughed, right? She laughed.
Yes, she does. She does laugh a lot. So does Sonia. They both laugh a lot.
Sonia cries sometimes.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and they do cry a lot. It is Chekhov after all. Okay. So right now we have Pat winning the episode. Unless Pat, you want to risk it all for a fifth question?
Yeah, that's what you
Or
do
you
when
want
you're ahead in the house. You
Yeah.
risk it all. That's what you do, and you can't win anymore, but you might as well lose potentially. Risk it all. Yeah, let's go for it.
There we go.
It's time for a bonus question.
What did Vanya take from the doctor?
Locked in.
Locked in?
All right, KJ, what do you have?
Was it the gun? Was it Chekhov's gun?
Pat, what do you got?
He takes a vial of morphine.
And that's correct. A vial of morphine.
Yes.
And
Now
the
I
victory
remember.
goes to Pat. Congratulations, Pat.
Thank you. I appreciate that.
You're welcome. You're welcome.
Nice one. But what about the trees? Audience, stay tuned for a rehearsed movie rant that isn't intended for audience consumption. Coming up right after this break. Join another Talking Studios production, Limited Lexicon, where we play through text-based adventure games. Text-based adventure games were computer games from before computers had graphics. The game uses text to describe a scene, and the player types back how they want to interact with the game. I'll read the text from the computer, and my co-host will feed me commands. This season, we're playing through The Hobbit from 1982 on the ZX Spectrum. Here's a quick sample.
I thought a lot about our first command, and I think it should be no print because we don't want to print things as we're going along.
I think by default, it's not going to print. And even if I did type print, where's it going to print to? 1982?
I would imagine if we go west, we're going to be south of the troll, right? Just south of the troll land.
Yeah, let's try it.
You go west. The troll's clearing. The visible...
Oh, we died.
All right.
The troll saw us and killed us.
So I think we have to say the answer to the riddle then.
The answer is dark.
Say dark, I think.
Talk to what?
Gold.
Gollum.
Say Gollum dark.
You talk to Gollum. Thorin says, hurry up.
And we died.
What?
And we died.
So we went northeast last time. So let's go southwest.
You go southwest. Visible exits are north, northwest. You see the valuable golden ring.
Oh.
We're ending it here. That's
Wait.
perfect.
Oh,
That's
right.
perfect.
Limited Lexicon, coming to your podcatcher and YouTube in late 2022 by Talking Studios.
And we're back. So I'm interested, KJ. This is one of my favorite movies, and KJ, you seem to hate it so very much. And I'm interested in, like, why did you hate this movie so hard?
Well, hate's a strong word, and let's start with a positive. I loved the jazz music in the intro. That intro with shots in New York, that was really fun. Let's start there. No, Tom, I actually texted you before we started watching the movie, and I said, hey, is there anything I should know before going into this? And you said, nope, there's nothing you need to know. So the movie starts with, I don't know, two strangers talking to somebody and say, hey, I heard you're rehearsing this thing. We'd like to see it. Right? That's how this movie is framed. I'm thinking, okay, this is a backstage movie because we're starting not on stage. We are beginning with a new audience. So I'm thinking, oh, maybe there's going to be a murder and we're going to figure out the murder mystery backstage, or there's going to be some kind of drama backstage. And throughout the movie, they cut to the donut table, right? Between acts and stuff. It's not just the play. We do get breaks from the play. And I just didn't realize, no, we're here to consume Uncle Vanya. Like that's why we're showing up. And by the time I realized that, I wasn't paying attention to the play. It's very sing-songy. Is that the writer guy, the translator? Is that why? Is it that the whole play was that rhythm, all the dialogue. And by the time I got there was people like, no, we need to save the trees. There was like Lorax type monologues. To go speaking and reading and talking like some. What a lovely day today. Not too hot. Like it was almost like David Lynch was performing this play. And I just think I couldn't figure it out. And I think I was just checked out. I probably should have went back and just watched it again with the knowledge. So that was those were my quote unquote issues with the play here.
Okay. That's thank you, KJ. I mean, I sort of get, if you don't know Chekhov at all, or you're gonna watch a stage reading, not a stage reading, but you're gonna watch a filmed production or filmed rehearsal of something. I get that it's somewhat maybe awkward to get into. The nice thing about Chekhov, though, is like his great plays are sort of similar enough that each one kind of provides an introduction to the others. So I would hope that you see other Chekhov plays and not be like scared away because of this film, or at least read them maybe before the next venture into Chekhov, if that ever happens.
The Seagull on 43rd Street. Are there other films?
Seagull on 43rd Street. Yeah. But interested in Pat's response to this movie. You said you had some problems with it, Pat.
Yeah, I mean, my problems are pretty minor. I mean, I think overall, I guess, as I said, I think it's one of the best films of a stage production ever. And again, that's different from like taking a stage play and just translating, or sort of adapting it to film. That happens all the time. But I don't think it's relatively rare, especially nowadays, to have a staged play just filmed, and it doesn't tend to work all that well. You just don't see it that often.
Hamilton.
Yeah, actually, those are great examples. I didn't even think about something like that. Those are actually probably good examples of something like that. And I mean, I remember even growing up, I think there was like a film version of, they did like a live version of like Sound of Music once, or sometimes you see it. BAM, I think, does it sometimes, where they'll do like simulcasted productions of plays. But it honestly just doesn't tend to work very well, because usually it's just a camera stuck on a stage and it just kind of film it.
Yeah, I'm picturing Les Mis on PBS or something like.
Yeah, actually, that's a really good example too.
Yeah,
something like that.
Does it. Yeah.
Yeah, I don't think those are very good. I think this one is a surprisingly effective one. I also really like the story of just these guys just getting together and just kind of rehearsing this play for no one for years on end. I think it's just kind of a cool story anyway.
It's very Buddhist, isn't it? It's very Zen. It's like the sand paintings that the Buddhists do. They're creating something for no one. And it's kind of wonderful for that reason. I did really like that idea.
Actually, yeah, that's actually kind of cool. It reminded me, there's a play I saw years ago by this guy. He was nominated for the Pulitzer that year, but this guy, Rindy Eckert, did this play, an adaptation of Orpheus, where the woman who dies is a poet, and she goes to hell, and her punishment in hell is she has to write poetry all the time, but it's in chalk on like a windy beach. So every time she writes in her chalk, the poems all get blown away. So again, I kind of like that just idea. I think it's, as you said, I think there's sort of this romantic kind of quality to it. But I also I think it's kind of a neat framing device to sort of have. I remember even watching in college, I thought it's cool where they kind of walk in and they're just they're talking about their day and they're talking about the other problems they have, and then they just kind of sits down and then just say like, would you like some vodka? They don't transition at all into the play, which I get to your point, KJ. Like, if you don't know that that's that they've
They're
started a
talking like this
play,
now. Okay.
that they've started a play, that's a bit confusing. But I like the framing device. And again, I don't know if you noticed, but they do, by the end of the play, the audience is actually gone. Because they showed at one point and they're all gone.
So we stayed for the whole play, but they didn't.
I don't think it's meant to imply that they got bored and left.
Okay,
I think you're supposed
okay.
to sort of
Got
see
it.
it as like, you are now like a part of the audience now.
Like we got absorbed into we're so absorbed into the play that we're just watching the play. It doesn't matter that the other audience members are there anymore.
Yes. So I like that sort of framing device. I did my major issues tend to be sometimes, there's a couple of the acting I think most of the performances are really good. I think some performances are less good. But I guess like there's a couple things where they sort of make it kind of filmy. Like I can't remember, there's at least one or two moments where they have the monologues in the person's head as if it's like a film, which I found really weird. Like,
yeah, was that pre-recorded and then just played on stage?
actually, I guess you could imagine it that's what they did. I never thought of that. I don't know. I didn't get the impression that's what you were supposed to get out of it.
Yeah,
okay.
Only remember that in one scene, which is Julianne Moore's character. It's when she's thinking about how much she likes the doctor, and this is right before the doctor comes in and sort of goes for her. And wouldn't it be wonderful if she could go off with him and shock everyone? But I also, like you, Pat, and I guess like you, KJ, as well, didn't get why that was a voiceover.
Yeah, in my notes I wrote, is this a ventriloquist scene?
Yeah.
Like, are we?
Yeah, I guess, and it also plays with the frame, right, in a weird way, like you're mentioning now, KJ, for not a lot of payoff. Anyway,
Maybe that's
Right?
the moment, although I never had noticed this before. Maybe that's the moment when the audience is like gone. Maybe if you were to watch from then on, maybe that's the point where there is no audience anymore.
But that's Act 2, isn't it? I think that's Act 2.
I don't remember. I don't remember. I think it's pretty late. I thought it was much later than that. Oh no, you know what? I think you're right. It is Act 2 because it's still
Act
the
3's
nighttime
the
scene. It's
gun.
right after the girl in the well, whatever her name.
Brooke Smith, I think her name is. Yeah,
I don't know what her real name is.
Sonia.
Yeah. But yeah, it's right after she leaves. I think you're right. She goes to do.
So it's after they ask her to wake up from her mermaid life, but before the doctor is wondering about the Green River on his map.
That's what I was just thinking about. I think actually, Tom, I think it is in the fourth act. I think it's when Sonia leaves to go get the doctor and bring him downstairs to tell her that she wants to look at the maps.
It's after that elephant scene.
Oh, I think you're right. Yeah.
I think that's when it happens, but you're right. The elephant scene isn't very good. But I just think as a filmed stage production, it's a very, very good production of the play itself. And I think it's a good edition of the play. It doesn't, I mean, it's translated by Mamet, but it doesn't feel too Mammoty. But I do like that about it as well. I think again, as I said, I think I said last week, like I think I've seen every of his major plays at least twice. And I've even seen some of his early plays a couple times. I've been to like an all-day Chekhov festival when I lived in London for 12 hours so it's like I've seen a lot of Chekhov and I like Chekhov quite a bit, and I do feel like this is one of the better film productions of a Chekhov play.
What do you like about it so much, Tom? How did this get to your top 10?
I think it's just that there is this idea of people who are working all the time to sort of make something, and it doesn't, and they don't end up succeeding in producing anything really of value, right? So there's like all of these characters are
I know a podcast like that.
Yeah, I mean, but I think that it's so I just like I don't know, like there's been so many so much of whatever, like my former career, maybe even my career now, has been like just struggling to like produce something, and it like not really getting off the ground or really working out, or even if it does work out, like, does this really matter? We put a lot of work into this, and like not a lot of people saw it or read it or what have you. And also those kind of romantic connections, which I think most people have felt as well, where it's, you this certain person you fall for or in love with is inaccessible. But I think generally this idea of the play of being like, in 100 years none of this will really matter, and the kind of horror of having to accept that. And then the beauty of the doctor, who really sees the way out of that kind of misery as being like, well, we'll plant a forest, and if in 1,000 years people's lives are a little easier, or they breathe a little easier because of the forest we planted, that will be a good thing. That'll be a positive thing. That kind of view, that's sort of that sort of looks towards legacy but subtracts the individual from that legacy, right? Nobody will know the doctor did that, or that the forest is as credit to the doctor.
Someone should read my article that was published a few weeks ago.
What's
Yeah,
the article,
sure,
Pat?
sure.
I'd love to read it. Where is it? How do I get
It's
to it?
on. You can read it on dappledthings. I think it's .org. Let me actually double check. Dappledthings.org. I wrote an article on Spencer Brewery. It's dappledthings.org. But I wrote an article on Spencer Brewery, which is a Trappist brewery that closed recently in Massachusetts. But it's a similar sentiment to that argument, which is, sort of the idea that, I mean, most of what an individual does just kind of vanishes into ether, and there's sort of this idea that you almost have to hope that even an anonymous accomplishment will last to some extent.
Yeah, and it's a great article. So, and Dapple Things is a good magazine as well. So, jump online and read that.
I didn't connect it to Chekhov, but actually it does fit. Chekhov often talks about the woods. He often has characters who are obsessed with the woods, and they talk about. I mean, and again, there is certain an element that sort of resonates nowadays, because there's always characters who are talking about. There's almost always a character who's sort of an environmentalist who talks about how all the forests are going to be gone in a few years, and there's always sort of someone who's like, all the forests could never be gone from all of Russia. That's a ridiculous thing to say, but there's sort of this sense that the characters have a requirement to sort of, that is, as much as they are obsessed with their own sort of self and sort of their own little petty problems, to some extent, they're also there's usually someone who sees their responsibility to the next generation as well.
Yeah. So that does appealing. And
that's why they're talking about forests.
Yeah, that makes a lot more sense. Like the despair came through, but I did not connect the dots that the forest was the balance to that. So I'm glad we had this discussion here.
The other thing, the ending is really striking too, I think, which is like, we will work and work, but then we will die and we will rest, right? This idea of like, you will finally rest and have like this Christian ethos that the play is working in, I think, is very, very kind of touching and heartbreaking as well. There's a certain irony in that it's supposed to be comforting, like, when you die, we will look down and we will pity our former selves and we will finally rest. Like the sort of sense of getting off this sort of treadmill. But it's also kind of terrifying. Like, that's when you rest, is when you have to die, and that's when you can look down and actually find pity. So that's sort of the irony of that ethos also was very affecting, and it really gets me every time I've seen it.
Well, audience, feel free to take a rest, because I'd like to once again congratulate our own Uncle Vanya, Nick. Congratulations, Nick. And Pat, well done too. Excellent work with these questions.
Mm-hmm.
Thank you for having me back.
Yeah, we've been awarding it to Nick every time, because when he hasn't been here, I don't think he's listening.
He'll never know because he doesn't listen.
You can rate and review this show anywhere podcasts are available. For those viewing in YouTube land, if you haven't already, please like this video, subscribe to the Talking Studios channel for all our exciting content, and follow us on Twitter at Talking Studios. Check out other shows by Talking Studios, including Keep Making Movies, where we explore micro-budget films, Limited Lexicon, where we play through text-based adventure games, and Get the Point, where we slowly reveal a movie poster and try to guess which movie poster it is. Got a question for us? Call the Talking Studios hotline at 201-467-8679 and leave a message. It may be featured on a future episode. And if you haven't already, please subscribe to Talking Pictures Trivia wherever fine podcasts are found.
Join us next time when we discuss Alien from 1979. Stay tuned for our first impressions of Alien.
Ding, 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 ding.
Next week, we'll be discussing a movie from my childhood, Alien. KJ, how was your first watch?
Tom, I think this movie, being from your childhood, might explain a lot. I cannot imagine watching this under the age of like 30 or 40. It's a pretty creepy movie. But my first experience was Alien was in MGM Studios, now called Hollywood Studios in Disney World, on the Great Movie Ride. I don't know if you guys have been on it, but it was a wonderful ride. And you go into the spaceship, and one of the aliens comes popping out and scares the living bejeebuses out of you. So that was my introduction. They have a Ridley. Ridley stood there with a gun and said something, if I remember correctly. And then the other experience I had with Alien without knowing it was Alien was Spaceballs. At the end of Spaceballs, they do the Alien parody. But then in my 30s, I did watch it while I was traveling, and it's good, guys. It's really good. And the rewatch for this show, I loved every minute of it. It's creepy. The sci-fi is cool. The sets are amazing. Audience, I think you're going to really enjoy it. How about you, Brian? How was your watch?
Yeah, it's funny that you say that your first experience with Alien was at MGM Studios on the great, or rest in peace, the great American movie ride.
Yeah.
But and that was the first time I saw anything to do with Alien, and my first view was, about 4 months ago, maybe, when we were talking initially about some of the upcoming movies that we could potentially talk about. And my second view was just the other day. But it really, like you were saying, I think it was ahead of its time in regards to the set design, the effects. It was 1979, 78, 79.
79. Yep.
So you think about that and how long ago that really was at this point, and everything still scares you. It jumps out, and it keeps you on the edge of your seat. It's a very quick, even though it's 2 hours long, it's a very quick watch. Time flies when you're watching it there. But I really enjoyed it. I can't believe it took me almost 40 years to watch the film, and looking forward to picking up the other couple. Tom, how was your watch there?
Good. I can't remember when I first saw this. My father had this on VHS, I believe, taped off of a home box office viewing of the movie. And I really loved this movie. As a child, I loved all of the Alien movies. I think even as a child, I knew Alien 4 wasn't very good, but I had a kind of compulsion for the initial trilogy. And I always enjoyed this movie most. As an adult, Alien Cubed is sort of intolerable. I think Aliens I don't like very much either. But this movie, upon revisiting, which I did for this podcast, actually does hold up. I mean, it's more brutal than I remember, though. It's a very stark and almost very mean movie. It has no kind of glamour to it, which is interesting. Like, the actors are a little older than your traditional cast of actors. The people you are probably, in the time anyway, most likely to have connected to are probably the characters who are going to die most quickly. They kind of pull a Psycho in that sense. I think the design of the ship looks great. I typically don't like designs like that are kind of gray and claustrophobic, but the ship sort of feels like an endless labyrinth. It's sort of no placeness. The fact that you can't really understand how the ship is put together really increases the creepiness of the movie. And it does have a kind of intense, almost mean-spirited nihilism to it, which for a horror movie I think works very well. I think that if this movie had more pretensions, I would probably hate it very much. But since it doesn't, since it has that kind of stripped down, um, way about it. I enjoy it even more, I think, as an adult. Though I will admit, it is not a gentle movie, and it does not treat its audience with any kind of gentleness.
Alien is available on Hulu at the time of this recording. Wow, Talking Studios.